why didn't you yell out? Why did you betray your community like that? And it's a hard thing to think about, but I'm glad that the blinders have been ripped off, and I now, of course, support full marriage equality, and I'm going to marry a dude next year. We were not a church-going family, but this was Nashville, Tennessee. So culture-wise, Jesus was everywhere, and being gay was not acceptable at all. I suffered a lot of bullying, and I was terrified of coming out gay. My mom's reaction was surprising. Being thrown out of the house for being gay was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had in my life. The one woman who I thought was who I have a good relationship with today, but who I thought was my pillar, was telling me that I had a special place to burn in hell, that God hated me, that God had sent AIDS to kill fags. And to have a parent say that to you is bad enough, but then to turn around and say, you're disowned, dismissed, get out of the house, you have an hour. And I lived in my car for 3 weeks, and it was horrible. I was suicidal, and there was a drag queen at the time, Carmela Marcela Garcia, girl, and now she goes by Mela, who told me to get my ass over to her condo immediately. And I always say that God used a drag queen to save my life. I was at a party after I had gotten kicked out of my house for being gay. And at the party, these two men, attacked me. And they got the best of me. And some lesbians came to my defense, thank God. They told the cops that I had been hitting on them, which was the furthest thing from the truth. And the cops basically, as they laughed at me walking by, said I deserved it. I don't know that I would have realized it at the time, but it instilled a sense that there's something wrong with me, that people would react this way and treat me this way, even though they were wrong and I knew they were wrong. This was back in the, close to mid to late 80s. It was a different world back then. You didn't live out loud and proud in Nashville, Tennessee at that time. My aunt, who was a church-going woman, sent me a one-way ticket on Greyhound, and I got on it, had $35 in 2 suitcases, and I was drunk as a skunk from the night before. And I knew that my life was out of control. I was doing ecstasy and all kinds of stuff all the time. And I knew I needed to change the scenery or I was going to die. And so I went to Texas, found out that the drugs were better there than in Tennessee, and quickly spiraled down to the bottom. I did become a Christian, and this was in Texas, very conservative part, and I look back and I wish I'd run down the street to the biggest gay church in the world, but I went a different path. Well, at the time, I kind of had this view of all Christians as being blue-haired, Bible-thumping, pew-jumping weirdos. And I went to this church that wasn't that at all. And they were actually cool, and it was full of artists, and their worship time was gorgeous. They had beautiful harmonies, and I was just all like, oh my gosh. They were home to an Exodus group. And so they were very cool, but then they're like, oh yeah, we love gay people. We have a special group for them on 7 o'clock on Thursday nights. And I was like, what kind of group? And I had met an ex-gay person in Nashville before, and I thought he was full of crap because I'd seen him out at the bars and stuff. I was like, is this one of those ex-gay groups? And they go, well, some people call it that. And I was just like, I don't want to go to that. And they're like, just give it a shot. And the first teaching I'll never forget was about emotional dependency, not even about homosexuality. It was a peripheral issue. And it changed my life. And they were talking about, emotional, and instead of it just being about helping me not be a codependent or emotionally dependent person, that was supposed to somehow help me not be gay.
So it gave you something you desperately needed, but there were some cruel strings that were hidden.
Correct. Yeah. I now look at it as a hook, using legitimate needs to pull you in and keep you there. And with the idea that you can be free, but you're always on the hook. There's always an issue that you have to deal with that never actually resolves your sexuality. But because of my experience, instead of me taking personal responsibility, it was because I was gay. It wasn't just because I was a dysfunctional person who didn't know how to do anything differently and had turned to those things in a dysfunctional way. It was because being gay is bad. And it was easy to scapegoat my bad experiences as reasons for why you should change. The false sense of community and acceptance that I experienced there was the first time I'd ever really felt accepted. It did not take long after I joined Living Hope to kind of put on the identity of being a former homosexual. And I found my voice, believe it or not. And I shared my story, and people were, crying. They were talking about how impactful it was and all this other stuff. And I was like, I can actually encourage, inspire, and help people. And of course, because in order to be an ex-gay poster person, you have to be a good storyteller. And I was apparently a good storyteller, so leadership picked up on that, and they started asking me to respond to letters we would get in the mail or lead a small group when a leader was out. Being a national spokesperson, looking back on it, was traumatic. And at first I thought it was fun. I thought it was exciting. But then looking back on it now, I know why I would get migraines before any TV interview. And if it wasn't friendly media, Christian, I would always get migraines. And I think it's because in my heart of hearts, I knew that what I was saying, it didn't matter how eloquently I could put it across or what story I could tell, it wasn't true. We were part of the Arlington Group and another group called the DC Group. And we went up to Capitol Hill. We went to DC at least once every other month, sometimes more, and lobby for the federal marriage amendment at the time. They felt like we gave legitimacy to their arguments on a relational and personal level. So they didn't see us as the think tank, culture vulture warriors. They thought of us as the personal stories that would give them legitimacy on that level. It was just a rush to have these high-profile people wanting us to join them in their public policy pushes. I went and met with Rick Santorum in his office, and I gave this big emotional testimony of my story and thanked him for his righteous stand for this, that, and the other. And for a senator to walk over, put his hand on my shoulder and say, I'm so glad you're here, was powerful. It was addictive. Right. Given my experience with the Arlington Group, it leads me to believe that Mike Pence is very supportive of ex-gay ministry, and he supports the efforts to try to convert people from gay to straight. When I met Kellyanne Conway, of course, it was long before she was ever the liar on TV that she is now. She came across as very personable, very smart. I never had a lot of personal conversations with her, but she was very supportive of us at Exodus. One of the ads that we were involved in was lobbying against hate crimes, and it was with the conservative argument that that to pass hate crimes would make homosexuals somehow more valuable than anybody else who experienced violent crimes. Looking back on it, it was another one of those moments where I just don't know how I was ever that person. It was horrible. I mean, I was a victim of a violent crime. When President Bush invited us to the White House, I'll never forget it. I was 20 feet away from the president, sitting next to Alan, who was sitting next to Bubba Cathy, who was sitting next to Dr. Dobson, and it just felt like this is what we're supposed to be doing. And now I look back on it, and I'm like, how dysfunctional, how awful is this? This is systemic bigotry and stigma in action at the highest level, and at the time I was involved in it. And now I look back on it and I'm like, why didn't you yell out? Why did you betray your community like that? And it's a hard thing to think about. In the ex-gay world, cognitive dissonance is an everyday way of life. And you're taught how to respond to the dissonance with words of faith. Like, I struggle, but this is my cross to bear. This is my thorn in my side. This is what all honest Christians have to put up with. And so even though you know that in your heart, you know that it's not working, that you're not changing, there's an excuse for it. There's still something you have to work on. There's still something you need to press through to the Spirit on. There's still counseling you need to go through. And so every time that voice of, you know this is BS, right? You had answers to stuff it down and say, that's the voice of Satan. This is not truth. This is not biblical, you know? And so every time reality would say, but this is true. You're not changing. That gay kid in the 80s was dysfunctional and unhealthy. That's reality. That's what you should focus on. No. I've got a church affirming family. I've got the national stage. I've got workshops. I'm telling all these things. I know that change is possible because I keep talking about it. But in reality, there's a program about Scientology by Leah Remini. And she often says in that program where it's a very difficult day when you realize that everything you believed in was a lie. And I had many of those days where it was ongoing revelation of how the hell did I get here? How the hell did I ever think that these folks had my best interest at heart? To the people who are harmed by the toxic theology and stigmatizing views that I once proposed and promoted, that made you feel alienated or disenfranchised from not only public policy but your own family, I'm very sorry. And if you're angry and you can't forgive me, I get it. I'm angry and I can't forgive myself for some things. I'm not trying to convince you to like me, but I do hope that you'll accept my sincere apology. And now that I know better, I'm going to do better. And I know that will only go so far with some folks, because I did a lot of really bad stuff. And I know that. And I'm trying to make amends for that. As a person who was a part of the ex-gay world for 23 years, who was a person in the upper echelons of leadership. You cannot change who you are as an LGBTQ person. You have to come to terms with that. And I would end by saying, it is a lie to say that you cannot be a happy, healthy, whole, and faithful LGBTQ person. I am a gay man. It took me a long time, 23 years, to come to terms with that. But I'm also a believer, and I'm engaged to another man, and I'm living my full truth today. And it is happy, it is healthy, it is whole. You can find that for yourself as well. And while all these other accusing voices are trying to convince you to do this, that, or the other, in your heart of hearts, embrace who you are. And that's where your freedom is. I'm about to get married to a dude. And I feel guilty. You know, it's like, do I deserve this?
You know, it's fun when you move into something with someone and you start making your own space and you start putting some of their things away to make room for your things, and you come across framed pictures of your partner in a tuxedo and you're like, that guy he's with looks so familiar. Oh my God, that's Carl Rove. Like, that goes in the bottom of the closet.
I like making fun of your Dan dance.
He likes making fun of the way I dance. But I haven't had as much exposure as you have. Well, it's perfectly acceptable dad dance. I'm a 50-year-old father.
It's cute. I said Dan dance. That's not a dad dance.
Well, that's kind of
that's
a
a you dance.
Well, okay, Dan, yeah.
It's cute.
I never was allowed to bust a move.
You should bust a move.